Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to take a look at my recommended replacements for reserve vehicles that I've obviously talked about in my previous tier lists. So as we already know, I have done a tier list on reserve tanks, and now of course recently I've done a tier list on reserve aircraft. And well, there was a few vehicles that I'm not happy about. So like I said in the aircraft one, I am going to be bringing these up as recommended replacements because I've spent about an hour or two on this, and to be honest, a lot of it is pretty common sense what it should be swapped with, but some of them I really had to do some digging. So of course, if you want to use this for a forum post, this video, feel free to do so, as long as credit to myself is given. Other than that, obviously there's timestamps available in the description below, beneath the, or up just above the usual links, which is the TikTok, Discord, and the Patreon. So, why am I doing this video? Short answer. Some of the aircraft and a couple of the tanks are pretty lacking, and they really shouldn't be giving that to new players and expecting them to work with it. Long answer. I've noticed this for a while now, and it's been pretty proving how little effort Gaijin tends to do when it comes to making and or updating reserve vehicles. They rarely do, but when they do, they seem to absolutely nail it in the case of the BF2C1, which I really like. Some of these vehicles would be far better off as optional reserve vehicle or research vehicles. I'm looking at the IGO Co's, or as I call it, the IGO Hangar, but you kind of understand why. So today I'm taking some of my time to look into potential replacements for the 9 vehicles that are being featured today, although you're only going to be seeing a total of 8 vehicles featured. Those being the Fury Mark 1 and 2, the Nimrod Mark 1, the D500, the IGO Co, the Chinese and Russian T-26s, the Sakeen, and finally the H-39. In the case of the Furies and the Nimrod, I'll only be featuring 2 replacements due to there not being a huge amount of replacements that isn't just, chucking 2 Gladiators in the tech tree and calling it a day, because that would be pretty lazy. So, rules for this video, and for once, because if you've watched my previous shall I say, submission tier list, well, not tier list, but my recent proposal videos from the past, I tend to be pretty strict on myself, but, it's something where, I kind of want to, give it something beneficial to a new player. And, I don't really want to give myself too many difficult rules to work with, because obviously there's a lot of potential vehicles, and, that can be something that, can benefit us. But anyway. So, rule 1. The vehicle must be beneficial to a newer player, whether that be a forgiving flight model, improved performance, better firepower, etc. It must provide a bit more to the reserves than what is currently in game. And of course, vehicles can be a prototype. Normally this is a rule that I don't like adding, but, I wanted to add something a bit more special when it comes to this. And, choosing a reserve vehicle that fits a lot easier. Some prototypes would be perfect fits for this. And vehicles proposed must also beat the replaced vehicles in at least 2 areas, whether that be speed, firepower, rate of climb in the case of an aircraft, armor protection in case of a tank, things like that. So, starting us off with the first British aircraft replacement. Now, excuse the white circle on the aircraft image here, that's to cover up a Finnish Swazi, as I'm calling them. I'm playing it safe, because you never know what YouTube's like these days. They may not like the fact that there's a Finnish Swazi there, so enjoy the random white circle on the aircraft there. And of course, first aircraft we're talking about today is the Gloucester Gauntlet Mark II. And if you take one look at this aircraft, it should look a bit like a Gladiator, and that's because it pretty much is. This is the slightly earlier version of the Gladiator. Obviously, it was refined and turned into the Gladiator. But of course, the Gauntlet was a little bit different. It had a slightly different engine, it still had the open cockpit, and it didn't have the firepower of the Gladiator. Now, as you can see, you may see similar design qualities of the Gladiator. Armed with 2 Vickers machine guns, they are like the Fury and the Nimrod in that case, but what it more than makes up for is its performance and flight handling, being around 10-15 miles an hour faster than the Fury, and nearly 40 miles an hour faster than the Nimrod. And most importantly, you get a better engine, and of course you get a better overall handling package. And just for the memes, well, I say memes, for those that are curious, I've added in number built, and also, things like that to obviously give a bit more of an idea. But there was 246 of the Gloucester Gauntlet built. There wasn't any specific numbers that I could find on the Mark II variant, but this felt like the best variant for it. So the engine is a Bristol Mercury 6S2 with 645 horsepower, max speed of 230 miles an hour or 370 kilometers an hour, climb rate of around 2,300 feet a minute or 12 meters a second, and of course the aforementioned Vickers Z machine guns being 7.7 in caliber. Overall, this would be a decent upgrade, you know? Because like I say, the very next aircraft you would get after the Furies is one of the Sea Gladiators. And this would just be a more familiar flight model for the players to obviously learn, and it gives us an excuse to have more British biplanes in-game, because we did have a lot of them. But at the same time, you know, this is just an upgrade from the Fury and the Nimrod, you know? It's just one of those, you know? Like, why do we still have to deal with Furies and Nimrods when we can have something like this, you know? And heck, give Finland one, you know? This one's in Finnish colours. You know, we might as well add them to multiple tech trees. Then, of course, we have the second British aircraft replacement, and that is the Gloster Gladiator prototype, SS-37. Now, of course, I did promise a Gladiator in the aircraft... Well, I sort of promised a Gladiator, but I didn't specify which one, and this got the local Spaniard in our Discord absolutely crying, let's put it that way. He was trying so hard to find this out. Now, this was mainly based off the Gauntlet, which you obviously saw in the previous slide. But it shared some components with the Gladiator, which obviously, you know, made it a bit more unique to add in here. Now, this is the clearest image I could find, so I do apologise for being a bit grainy and, of course, you know, old. But, well, that's just what happens, unfortunately. To be more beneficial for a newer player, the specifications for which will be down below will be based off the later prototype, which has the same engine as the Gauntlet. Now, there's only one built because this was a private venture and a private prototype. Specifications. The engine is exactly the same as the Gloster Gladiator from the previous slide. The speed is a little bit higher, but, you know, the climb rate is approximately 2,300 feet a minute. I based it off of the Gauntlet stats, so, you know, that is something. But where it makes up for that is, of course, the two Vickers Z machine guns on the sides of the cowling. And if you could just look under the... I'll try and point it out. This little bit over here. These are under wing pods with Lewis machine guns. And they're all 7.7. They would have slightly different ballistics for, you know, each individual gun. But the overall performance increase would just be really nice. And, you know, having the firepower as well of two Vickers Zs and two Lewis machine guns, that's pretty good. And, you know, it's just more beneficial for a newer player. And because it's pretty much a Gladiator with how it flies like the Gauntlet, this should be pretty good. And honestly, I think it's a pretty worthy pick. And like I said, our local Spaniard who loves to, you know, take a look at, you know, the various different vehicles that I do for proposal videos, he was absolutely hating the fact that I chose this one because he had to really do some digging for it. Now, of course, prototypes aren't really something that, you know, people may want, and I can understand if people are annoyed about it. You know, me mentioning a prototype here. But, you know, it shares a lot of its characteristics with the Gauntlet, and it also shares a lot of its characteristics with the Gladiator, obviously having the underwing gun pods. So, you know, it wouldn't really be too much to ask, and like I say, you could have it as Gladiator SS-37 or Gladiator Proto or something like that, or Gladiator Early, you know, something like that. Obviously, you know, there is, you know, well, there is ways in which you can obviously, you know, add it in. And I just thought it was a perfect fit. So now we move on to the D500 aircraft replacement. And the first one I originally did was like another Parasol fighter, but I barely found any info on it. So I ended up swapping it for the, I'm probably going to butcher this, but the Blériot Spad S510. And this was actually the last biplane fighter of the French Air Force. And fun little fact for you, of all the proposals submitted, this is the only biplane. The rest were either monoplanes or parasols. It served from 1936 and ended life as a trainer. It also had a few gun setups with 2 cowling, 2 wing, or all underwing. The variant I'm proposing lacks the 20mm cannon, which, you know, we don't really want a new player throwing around a 20mm if we can avoid it. But, you know, we could add in the 20mm version if required. Number built, 61 of all different variants. I think it was the very last couple of ones that were built had the 20s in it. But of course, the engine is a Hispano Suiza 12X BRS with 690 horsepower, top speed of 230 miles an hour or 370 kilometers an hour, climb rate of just under 3,000 feet a minute or 14.8 meters a second, and the armament was 4 7.5 Mach 1934 machine guns. Like I said, you could have it 2 in the wings, 2 in the cowlings, or 2 under the wings, similar to the D373 from what I've been able to read. And, it'd be a little bit more maneuverable than them, it would have similar speed to them as well, and, its climb rate was not too bad either, so, and like I said, we could add in the variants with the 20mm cannon if we wanted to, so this is technically, not a bad idea, and you could put the one with the 20mm at 1.3 or 1.7, and it'd be completely fine. But that's just one of the many unique aircraft I've decided to go with for this one. But now we move on to a tank, which I'm fairly certain I'm going to piss a few people off with this choice. The folks in the Discord server did not have a Scooby what this was, and to be honest, I didn't either until I looked into it. This is the Batignon Chatillon DP2. Ironically, I actually have a French GCSE. Not a very good one, though. I got a G, so that gives you an idea. French designers, from what I've been able to read, took quite an interest in amphibious vehicles, and as such, conducted research and manufacturing into them. This vehicle started off as a very different vehicle to the one you see on the screen there, but went through a bunch of, changes, and obviously, it went through a few different ideas, but only one was made, and that might throw some of you off. Now, why did I propose this vehicle then? Well, it's amphibious, which, that would give it something unique, a bit like the LVT, obviously without the crew amount and stuff like that. But it does bring familiar territory, with the 25mm cannon being the same as the AMD 35, and we all know how good that thing is. So, of course, there was only one built, because, it's very ugly. It looks like it's been dropped a few times, but we'll gloss over that. It had a crew of 3 with a Hispano-Suiza Type 81 engine with 228 horsepower, a speed of 40.5 kilometers an hour forward, or 25.1 miles an hour, and a 4.5 kilometer an hour, or 2.7 miles an hour reverse speed. Armor was between 6 and 15 millimeters, so, you're going to have to use that mobility, because it's not bad, This thing's not that heavy, and 228 horsepower will make this thing shift. But with a top speed of 25, might be a little bit tricky to get it into some locations compared to something like a Stuart. But yeah, the armor's 6 to 15 millimeters thick. It's not the most thickest, and obviously with only 3 crew, could be a little bit of a problem, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I also added in the water speed for this one, because obviously it is an amphibious vehicle, and it does around 6.5 kilometers an hour, which is around 3 miles an hour. Not the greatest, but, it gets it going, I guess. Then, of course, the weaponry is the 25mm SA-35 cannon, same as the AMD 35, and it also comes with a coaxial machine gun of 7.5 caliber. Overall, out of all the vehicles I could have picked, this was definitely the more unique approach, and to replace the H-39, which, the H-39's 47 is notoriously unreliable, and whilst it does have pretty good armor, there are vehicles around that battle rate which just have better armor anyway, and this is a lot faster as well. So that would give it an edge, and also giving it a 25mm just makes more sense to me, And, well, plus I don't really like the H-39 as a tank, but, that's just me. Next up, we have the Igoco tank's replacement, with the Type 3, if I could English, Kiru. Now, this was designed to originally increase the firepower of the Hargo light tank. Mounted the same gun as the Chiha medium tank, which is the 57mm heat slinger, this vehicle as a result ended up being about 1 ton-ish heavier, but sadly never saw combat, was only used for domestic testing. Approximately 5 were made. I've not really found a definitive source that tells me how many, but it varies from around 1 to 5 being manufactured. Crew of 3 with a Mitsubishi A6120 VDE diesel engine, producing 120 horsepower. It has a top speed of 48 kilometers an hour forward, which is nearly 30 miles an hour, and a reverse speed of 3.2 miles an hour, or 5.2 kilometers an hour in reverse. Obviously, if you take a look at the hull, you'll notice it's the Hargo. That's pretty much what it is. And if you look at the turret, that is a Chiha turret. Yep, it's pretty much just 2 tanks bodged together, but hey, it works, don't it? But of course, the armor is around 12 to 30 millimeters in most areas. There are some areas which are lighter, around about 10. Then, of course, we have the weaponry, which is the 57mm Type 97 cannon, same as the Chiha. 2 7.7 machine guns, one mounted in the roof, which, makes sense for the Chiha, and then, of course, one mounted there in the hull. Obviously, this thing wouldn't exactly be much in terms of armor, but you're playing Japan. Like, come on, you're playing Japan. You don't need to, think about that. But the fact that it's a Hargo light tank, which is actually a pretty nice tank to drive, aside from the gun, of course, but you're upgrading it with a 57mm from the Chiha, that's a pretty good trade-off. And yeah, heat can be a little bit unreliable, but, that'd be a lot better than the little dinky 37mm, which could not even pen a Panzer III most of the time. So this would just give them a nice upgrade to the firepower, and most importantly, it would not be much effort to work this into the game. But, well, it's Gaijin. You kind of understand that. Next, I've had to take an image from Reddit, because there is literally no images of a Chinese BT5 in service. They got a grand total of 4, but we'll go over that. So, of course, we all know the BT5 was a fast light tank with unique suspension setup, the Chrissy suspension, and a fast-firing 45mm. China received a grand total of 4, and seemingly lost them all in combat, because I literally can't find anything on them. No images exist of them in Chinese service, so here's a Reddit post of a Chinese BT5 being mentioned. You can actually make out the Chinese flag just up here. Apparently this has been in the game for a long time, which is interesting, because you'd have thought they'd have added it in as, a potential reserve replacement for the T-26, but no, they just haven't. They'll be built between 1,800 to 2,100 units. I based that off of the Russian BT. I can't really find a definitive source. Specifications, a crew of 3. I've noticed a lot of my vehicles that I'm proposing here is a crew of 3, but we'll gloss over that. It has a M5 diesel engine with 400 horsepower, a top speed of 72 kilometers an hour forward, or 45 miles an hour, and of course 6.2 in reverse, or 10 kilometers an hour. Armor is between 6 to 15 millimeters, which of course is mainly around the turret. And, well, it's the 45mm 20k, What more can I really say? It's got a DT machine gun as well as a coax. But, yeah, this thing would be a pocket rocket. And if you've ever driven a BT5, you'll be in pretty much familiar territory. Now, I'm sure someone's just going to say, oh, you might as well just play Russia at that point. Yes, but you'd get the BT5 paired with the M8 LAC. I can foresee a lot of clubbing with that, but, hey, what else do you want them to have, The Chinese T-26, whilst it is a cool little upgrade that they've given it, a few months back, I'd rather just give them a BT-5, which is going to be a lot more effective, but that's my decision anyway. And, like I said, they did get 4 of them, from what I've been able to read from sources, but, it's something, But, like I said, this would just be a complete overhaul of the T-26, and, it is something where, it will obviously lack in a couple of areas. It's very vulnerable to 50 cals, like the T-26. But I'm sorry, 72 kilometers an hour compared to, 90... Well, it'd be it's about 30, 35 kilometers an hour on the T-26. Not even that. It's night and day. Why would you drive a T-26 when you can drive this, But one thing I will say is they should keep the Chinese T-26 Premium in the game, because obviously that did technically have some historical relevance, and, keep the regular Tech Tree T-26 in the game, but make this the reserve. Don't make this a Tech Tree tank. You'll be making a big mistake, Gaijin. Next, we have the Russian T-26 replacement, because obviously we already have a BT-5 in the game, and, well, I'm not going to give them something that is too busted, and, well, I've always wanted this tank in the game anyway. So, it's something where, you can actually see what I mean. And, well, if you look at the hull of this thing, you kind of guess where this is going. This is the BT-2. The predecessor to the BT-5, it had similar design qualities to the BT. Main difference was the turret, packing a 37mm cannon, which, from what I've been able to find in terms of penetration, had about 50mm of penetration, so it's about the same as a Panzer III. But I'm not being funny, right? You're on a BT chassis. You should not be complaining about that. The armor on the turret is also less than the BT-5 due to not having an overlap. 3 different versions of the BT-2 exist from what I can see. There's a variant with just the 37, there's this variant with the 37 and the machine gun, and then there's twin machine guns for whatever reason. A number built of approximately 650, sources do vary, but, The crew, of course, is 3, which is becoming a bit of a running gag, but, Now, it was powered by an earlier M5 diesel engine with 350 horsepower, but it could still reach the same speeds as the BT pretty much, from what I've been able to read. Armor again is 6 to 15 millimeters, but you know, that's to be expected. Most of the frontal slope is around about 13 millimeters, but obviously you don't have the extra overlap on the turret, so that's something to bear in mind. It's one of those things, really. But of course, the weaponry is slightly different, with a 37mm B3/5, well, brackets 5K machine gun. Like I said, you're looking at about 50mm of penetration, with a 7.62 machine gun coaxially mounted. It's not bad at all, you know. This is a pretty decent little tank, and it would be a great replacement for the T26. And I've even seen on the post, because I looked at a few different sources, including a War Thunder post, people were actually saying you should swap the BT5 for this, and I could see where you're coming from, but, you know, the BT5's been in the game far too long. Just add this, replace the T26, Bob's your uncle, fan is your aunt, as us Brits say. And finally, we come to the Sakeen replacement, and I spent a good 45 minutes on this. You know, most of this video, most of this video was around about an hour to 2 hours to make, you know, with finding specifications and things like that. But I'm having to do a bit of a bodge job because, well, there's a reason why the D130 is specified there. So this is the Spitfire Mark 9C D130. And this is what was known in the UK as a bodge job. It had parts from multiple Spitfires, including a crashed Egyptian Spitfire, which explains why it has a unique colouring as seen here. Additionally, it's a C-wing, but not with the MGs, so it would need to be balanced accordingly. Obviously, a regular Mark 9C is at 4.3, this thing would need to be around 4.0 just to make sense. Now sure, you are bumping a player who's just hit rank 4 up a little bit higher, but if they've already hit rank 4 to unlock Israel, chances are they're going to have some of an idea. And of course the number bodged, because it wasn't exactly one built, was 1, because this is pretty much what they did primarily. From what I've read as well, this is actually one of the longest serving Spitfires in the Israeli Air Force at the time. I think it was lost in 1951 to an engine fire, but, well, that's just to be expected. So, of course, it has the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61 engine with 1,470 horsepower on WEP, of course. Top speed of 398 miles per hour, or 642 kilometers an hour. Climb rate of just over 3,700 feet a minute, or 18.9 meters a second. Guns, 220mm Hispano Mark II cannon with 240 rounds total. And now I added this last bit because I wasn't sure, but because this is the recon wing, as I'm going to have to explain that, but basically the C-wing that's on this plane was the recon version. So there were some Spitfires that were obviously modified for air recon, you know, with the pink paint and stuff, as some of you may know. And they didn't have the machine guns to, you know, lighten the weight and obviously give it a little bit more range. The reason why I'm saying I'm not sure is because the 500-pounder or the 250-pounder would be mounted centrally. But to me, that seems a bit, you know, odd that a photo recon wing would then have facilities for, you know, a bomb of some degree. But obviously the C-wing doesn't really play a huge part in this, so I would imagine it can still carry a bomb. But I don't know, because I don't seem to have found anything on, like, bomb racks or anything. But it could possibly carry a 500-pound bomb or a 250-pound bomb. But again, I'm not sure, because, trust me, I spent 45 minutes trying to find this bleeder. I barely found this image, let alone anything else. And if you actually look at the aircraft, obviously I know it's in black and white, you can actually see what I mean about the different colouring. It is wacky, because like I said, it's parts of like 5 or 6 different Spitfires. But anyway, and that's it for today. I know this is a bit of a shorter project than some, and it took around about an hour to 2 hours to complete with the vehicle research and proposals. And of course, I tried to pick things that were either unique or provided something new to the tree, i.e. the French tank, and I did have to use a couple of prototypes, or in the case of Israel, a bodged Spitfire, but these things provide something new and unique. If you have any thoughts on anything here, make sure to leave them all below, and of course, share this video if you want to use it for a forum post, please do make sure. And well, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.